As a confidant and coach to business leaders, I know a lot of people who are rich and miserable, and those on the opposite side of the spectrum. So let's pull it all together, shall we? We'll explore the intersection between wealth and joy. We'll look at the psychology, spirituality, and practicality of money, plus some of the things that make up a truly lucrative lifestyle. I'm your host, Mindy Kinnis, and this is the Lucra Life. Welcome back, my friends. I am joined today by two very special guests. I am super excited to introduce you all to Shane and Angie Saunders. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I am so excited to get into this conversation because, as Lucrative Society members know, you were recently with us and you took us through this amazing experience in that group. And I was like, I would love to share this wisdom with a much broader audience, all of my podcast listeners. So we are here today to talk about that. But before we get into all of their expertise and information that they have to give to you, I would love to get to know them a little bit better. And let's begin here. How did you two get to what you are doing now? I'd love to hear about your career evolution.
I had quite a long evolution. I'll keep it short.
Story then.
37
I'm not even 40. Well, nearly 40. So look, my evolution was I always wanted to be a big star when I was young. And so I always thought I was going to go into the entertainment industry. When I got there, I got into it, high school, they didn't have a drama club. I started one, so it was like my vision to be a part of the entertainment industry in some way or another. And I made it happen for sure. Got started, where I was in Sacramento. I used to live in California and then was in Los Angeles by the time I turned 21. And I was in front of and behind the camera. And then I was I actually wanted to do production coordinating. So I got behind the scenes and I was working in production and I was loving that as well. Then it was a couple years into it. It was all too overwhelming for me. And when I say overwhelming, I was working about 90 hours a week. It was like, and Hollywood is like work hard, play hard. That's just the way it rolls. And it's highly competitive. And I remember it was a big turning point for me when I was semi-finalist for the first season of the Pussycat Doll show. And
That's amazing.
I was doing, it was pretty cool, but so I went to go do my solo and I was doing I was singing and, anxiety took over. I had a little bit of a panic attack in the middle of my song and I completely lost timing and they're like, thank you. And I'm like, my heart melted. And I was like, this was not what I built my whole life for. And, in hindsight, I realized that wasn't really the career for me. It wasn't actually where I was meant to be. It was a stepping stone, but it was not really where I wanted to. And I already kind of had these feelings like, I kind of starting to feel unsatisfied. I was 25 by this time. And I was like getting older and my body was slowing down. And I'm like, I want a family and I don't want a family in this atmosphere. And so, shortly thereafter, within a couple of years, I met Shane and we hit it off straight away. It was like, it's total like bells and whistles and sparkles and stars galore when we met, actually still is 13 years later. And I only knew him for like 6 months. I sold everything and I moved to Australia and I completely started over. And he's like, don't have to rush into anything. So I started working at a bookstore. Then I worked at a bank. And then I had a baby. We got married. We had a baby. I went through postnatal depression and then we started, Shane had already started, when he got out of the military, he started his own business and personal training. And so I got involved in that. So I was helping him doing some training as well. And then we just really realized that we have like this deep desire to help people feel better and to just like, whether it's mind or body, but it was just like, what do we need to do to feel better? And it started with me because I was going through postnatal depression. I was having big transition phase in my life into my 30s, going from, I built my whole life to go into the entertainment business. And now what, so that was a huge mogul for me, or turning point in my life. But when we got into breathing, that's when it really made the difference. So we spent a lot of time and money on headspace stuff, and it's very good because you need to know what to do to feel better. But for me, it was like knowing what to do to feel better and feeling better was a little bit of a missing link. I was still very highly emotional. I felt like I couldn't control it. Felt like, no matter, I couldn't think my way out of anger. I couldn't think my way out of anxiety. So then when we got into the breathing aspect of things, that's when I really noticed that I came back into who I knew I was to be. And it was like I became like this cranky mom, who was just miserable. And I'm sure it wasn't great to come home to, and I was like, this is not okay.
Happy wife, happy life.
True story. True story.
Yeah. So I set out to do the work. And the headspace was, helped, but it wasn't until we really did the breathing, and actually cold immersions really did help me personally. But it was breathing, being able to manage my emotions. It was being able to express my emotions without, having to yell at my children or yell at him, for being children, so that,
or for me, for
or
being
for
me.
you, for being you.
Exactly.
So disciplined and everything. so that's where we came to where we are today, because I remember in 2015, 2016, I was like, I have to write a book. Let's write a book on all the things that work for us, because if it works for us, it can work for other people. It won some awards, and I was like, and I thought, wellness was the thing, but no, it just kept coming back to breathing. It was just breathing. It was all about the breathing. It was like breathing was the thing. And so we spent the last 5 years deep diving into why it's so effective.
I want to fill a few things in
please
before I start with mine. With Angie, her, when I met her and her career, or where she was, it was high pressure. It was very high pressure. I mean, I was on leave from military and actually visiting, and that's when we met. And I was astounded at the amount of hours that she was working. Coming from Australia to the US, I had no idea, that Americans work so much.
How insane we are.
Yeah, like, well, just there's a great aspect to that, and then there's this aspect of if you're going to work that much, you need to have the tools and the things to avoid burnout and things like that. So, when Angie mentioned about going through postnatal depression and things like that, and she kind of just glazes over that, but it was really not a great time. It was really, coming home, I would come home from work, and I remember saying to her, that I know why some men want to come home and go to the bar or go to the pub, or don't want to come home when it's not a happy environment. And that wasn't a dig at her for just being grumpy. It was, we were just like at that point where it was like, well, what do we do about this? And both of us, the reason that we're still married today is because both of us are never about blaming each other. We know that we own our own stuff. We know that we're not allowed to put our own complaints and blame on each other, and that's what we do. That's an agreement we have as being married and being life partners and all of that sort of stuff, is that we take responsibility. So it was like, okay, what are we going to do? And Angie mentioned we wrote that book, and that book really came out of like, well, what is it that we do that we see other people not doing or don't know about, that has us so happy with each other, has us, we still fight. Like she's thrown pieces of toast at me, and we've you know what I mean, days. Like we still argue on different points. We have healthy debate on things. We very quickly, like I said before, own our own stuff. But that's kind of how it came to it. And I'll backtrack now a little bit, Mindy, and give you where I had a career in the military very early. I joined the military at 16. I wanted to get out of where I was, and I in enlisting in the military, I had all these amazing experiences for me. I was before I was 18, I was deployed in Southeast Asia, so I was already deployed on missions in Southeast Asia before I was 18. I transitioned from general service into specialized services. First was physical training. So I was put in charge of training divers, soldiers, sailors, all manner of the defense in physical fitness. So that's kind of where I got my grounding in
Totally
that. And
makes
it's
sense.
very different, very different to training, say, just an athlete. You're training for combat, you're training for arduous conditions, you're training for sleep deprivation, all these different things that bring an element of the mind into that training, like that you wouldn't get that aspect as a, just in everyday life unless you're living that kind of life. So it was a unique experience. And I went on to go through that special forces training myself. And in going through that special forces training, what a lot of people don't know is I got into the end of that training cycle. And looking back on it, it's easy for me to say this, but I didn't know this at the time. But it was like, it just didn't gel with me. Like a combat role did not gel with me just because of my personal makeup. And I look now and think, I didn't want to take life. I wanted to give life. And that was a very big distinction. And there is a role for those people in the military. And I have a lot of friends in there that are still in special forces that are in those roles. And they're hugely difficult roles to be in. Coming back into the social fabric is extremely difficult for those kind of roles. So they are mentally taxing. And I kind of looked at that and went, do I want a family or do I want that? Do I want the glory of that kind of thing? And it's a very hard choice to make, especially having an ego and being a male. I was like, well, what do I want to do? So as Angie mentioned, I transitioned out of the military. And the most interesting thing about transitioning out of the military was that most people said to me, you'll be back. You'll come back in because you won't survive outside because you're indoctrinated, you're institutionalized. And I was like, I told
You
him
can
where to
say
go.
what
I
you
was
really
like,
wanted to say.
I was basically, I said, no, that won't happen. And forged ahead and basically went into entrepreneurialism. I started that journey in starting my own business, trying to work out what that was all about. Trying to do your own books, trying to be your own bookkeeper, trying to be your own marketing, trying to do all the things, right? All the things. Now, if I can tell you, out of a 13-year career in the military, being deployed in war zones, if I was to match that against running a business is way harder, way more difficult, and is probably one of the greatest self-development courses that you could ever do, aside from having a really healthy marriage and raising children. I'll say that they trump those ones. But just, for all those people that are involved in this journey, it truly is an opportunity for you to really see what you're made of and stick to that, stay on the path and stick to it. And, our business that we run now is born out of that. And our business is really, Angie touched on feeling good. Our business is really born for me out of personal excellence. And if you want to do something really well, if you really want to bring your gifts and your talents to the world, then you have to be at the level of an elite, whatever it is, elite athlete, elite soldier, elite, you name it. It's got to be at that, because there are times where this stuff's going to get on top of you. And if you are, if you're not treating yourself well physically, like, you don't take care of your sleep and your health and things like that, then you will, at some stage, the energy will be drained out of you, mentally and emotionally. And you need to have the physical strength to be able to weather those storms. So, really where we've come at this from is that we've seen that, we've traced it back and gone, okay, here's the energy that we come with. And our wealth is a direct reflection of our energy, because, yes, it produces the money, but there's all these other aspects to it as well that comes into it. And so we've looked at that. Like, we've looked at how do you maintain and extract as much energy from your environment as you can, and then how do you maintain it, and then how do you become the channel for that abundant flow of energy, because it is abundant. And a lot of people say, well, it's not. But you think about it, when you're so passionate about something and you're into it and you're doing it, you don't feel fatigue. And you know, I've experienced that before. I've been pushed to limits that are well beyond the normal capabilities of people in service, you know, while I was deployed and things like that, and during the training. But when you're really into something, when you're really into what it is that you do, it's boundless. Like, you'll just keep, the energy will flow through. The trick is getting out of your own way to allow that flow through to happen.
Oh yeah.
Is the big thing. So that kind of sums up where we are to here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love what you're saying, because so I talk a lot about something that I call heart path, which is how your heart is always guiding you on, like, quote, the right path. You're never off your path. And to that point, each of you bring all of those collective experiences that you had all along the way, and even the hard ones, you know, even all the stuff that Angie, you were going through after you had your babies and all that stuff, it contributes to what you have created now, which I think is probably very closely aligned or exactly on your ultimate purpose. So I love that. And I also want to just drop a little note in for any of my students that happen to be listening. I am constantly talking to them about drilling down, drilling down, drilling down to pick a niche. And as you two both alluded to, oh, we were doing like wellness, general stuff. So that's in the big health category. Okay, drop it down one more to wellness. And now breath work. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. So let's talk about that. What are you doing now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we've basically spent the last 5 years deep diving into, like, who can we learn from? So either going and experiencing firsthand, or reading ancient texts, or even all the way from, so really from transformational breath work to clinical breathing techniques. Like, we've studied everything in between. I feel like there's not much that we haven't studied, but there's so much out there. I'm sure there's something that we've missed.
Good. And breath, like the word breath work, it doesn't do it justice, as in the I guess the vision in most people's heads that conjures up of you know, you being in your yoga class and doing some breathing or breath work as a practice. And really, like, the way we've come to look at it, and Angie mentioned the ancient side of it, it's interesting to note that in every religious text, every ancient text that we could find everywhere from every society or culture around the world has a reference to breathing, has a reference to them doing some form of breathing as a spiritual practice. And even the word for inspiring, in the Latin term, is synonymous with spirit. So you have this really interesting thing where you're inspiring life force, and then it's mixing with everything that you are and expressing behaviors. And that's where it really kind of caught for us, was that yes, you can sit down and you can breathe, and you can get really high from it. You can have all kinds of different experiences from it. You can gain energy from it. It can relax you. It can help you focus. But there's this behavioral component to it, and there's this whole bit about you know, expiring, right? Like, you just think about it, inspiring, expiring. They're all references to beginning and ending. So this, you know, it's very interesting that it's a cycle that happens in your life from the time that you're born and you take that first breath till the time that you expire. And you've got this consistent cycle happening. And that cycle is so deep in knowledge, whether it's self-knowledge that you're finding out about yourself, or whether it is knowledge just in general about your body. So breathing, we look at breaking it up into two main categories when it comes to the science side of it. The mechanical aspect of how you breathe, so the way that your lungs move when the muscles expand and contract, is very different to respiration. So respiration refers to the chemical exchange that happens in the gases in the body. And there's a really important exchange that happens between oxygen and CO2. And often people think about CO2 and they're like, well, it's just a waste gas, you breathe it out. Well, it's not exactly. It's a really, really important gas that helps regulate blood pH through the salts in your body. Your blood pH regulates your brain neurotransmitters, which control all the moods in your body, and pretty much how you show up will be related to your breathing. And this is a really important point. And this is kind of like really one of the main points that Angie and I are bringing to the awareness of breathing and breath work and all these things in general around breathing, is that it affects the way you show up. It affects your presence. It affects, how you communicate in your relationships. It affects your relationship to money, because money is energy. It affects your relationship to wealth. It affects everything, because from moment to moment, each breath, your body is shifting and changing, and if you let it go undetected, if you do not pay any attention to your breathing, it will get affected by your environment. Now think about what that means. If your environment is dictating how you breathe, is it any wonder that you're in an environment, you start to feel anxiety? It's because the environmental factors, but you have an opportunity to intervene.
So this is where it ties in really nicely with like a practical application for the every breath or for everyday life. So it has been said that we've got the human experience is roughly around 187 different emotions, both positive and negative. Now that can be overwhelming at times, especially if you're experiencing a lot of those at once. And what we're finding is that each one of those emotions is like what Shane says, it mixes with with who you are, your essence, and then it gets expressed. So if you're experiencing an emotion, it will either serve you or it will not serve you. Now, what most people don't know is that we live in such a society where it's so fast paced. We try to control everything, even trying to control our own breathing mechanism. So our breathing is really good at self-regulating, but we get in the way and try to take control. So say, for instance, I'll give you a really good example for me. In the early days, I was very angry because I was fatigued and I was dialed to cranky is what we call it. And I would just spark off and just get, angry if I couldn't find my favorite pin, just something as silly like that. And I would have this feeling rise up in my body, and it would be anger for me. And I would have this certain breathing pattern. And what I would do is I'd try to stuff it or stop it because I don't want to feel it. And this rage would then start to build within me, and I would hold on to it until such time that I would just blow and yell for no reason really at all. And then of course that has flow on effects to my children and to my relationship and that sort of a thing. So what we started doing
business relationships,
yeah,
also this stuff
team
affects
members like
team
this.
members.
It's not just
Right.
at home team, it's the work team as well. And so what I found is that when I actually took myself away and expressed that emotion, allowed my body to express it rather than trying to suppress it in such a way where like sometimes I didn't have words for it. So I'd go and breathe. We called it angry breathing. I would go and do my angry breathing. And then I would come back feeling so much better because I was able to express myself, release the energetic emotion that I was holding on to in my body, and have a proper conversation. And therefore come from the perspective of teaching my children or connecting and working out an issue rather than sparking off and being reactive.
She would go from grumpy to friendly in about 100 breaths.
Yes. 300 if I was really angry.
I really like that though, because that's such an easy thing to do. And let me ask you two something, because I'm really curious about this in everything that you're talking about, especially with all of the emotion. So almost about 2 years ago, when my husband passed away, I basically left my life. Like I went to California, I lived in the desert for 2.5 months by myself just to experience grief. That was it. And the thing that I found, and I had read about this, other people talk about this as well, is I just end up sighing a lot. And I know that you two have talked about sighing because I've done the breathing with you. And talk to me about that. Like what is happening when I was just sighing all the time?
It's body's energetic way of letting go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's two parts to it. Really, there's the chemical aspect of it and the breathing aspect, as we mentioned before, which is rebalancing the CO2,
Mm.
right? And the CO2 as we said before, the mechanism through the blood pH controls mood. So your body is teaching yourself to let go of things. So grief often happens around the lungs and the heart. Makes sense, right? Like if you look in Chinese medicine and these sorts of things, you'll see grief. Like if you go to a doctor that's that way inclined, they'll talk about grief being in the lungs, and things like that. So, you know, being able to release that energy or let it go, and then on an energetic level, like you were talking about, just that you're training to let go. So, you know, when we do circular breathing, we teach people all the time, and we're saying to them, when you learn this technique, you're training your mind and you're training your body to consistently let go of energy. And that's a good practice, because whether something's really, really exciting, really good, or whether it's extremely painful and full of grief, you need to be able to let go of the energy, because it'll always cycle round, right? So, you know, and this is, you know, we don't come with a handbook, right? Like humans don't come with a handbook. But what we do come with is we do come with instinctual, inherent sort of ways that our body reacts. And as Angie said before, about getting out of the way of those instincts. And again, this teaching is really, and this, what you described is a really good example of you just coming to that without needing to be taught anything. Like you're naturally going to come to that point. It's really interesting in studying breathing sciences. One of the most interesting things that I found was that your body will form a breathing pattern that will block you from accessing traumatic memories in certain parts of your brain, right? So it will create a pattern that will alter the gases that will stop you from accessing deep memories, core memories, or things like that. So it's
That's
really
amazing.
interesting. Yeah, it's a defense mechanism. It's a mechanism that you don't want to feel that, so it'll block it off. You don't want to feel, you know, like I know that this may happen. It happens for all humans, but think about, you know, this is a bit of one that's a bit way out there, but even sexual problems, right? For men or for women, you will block off feeling from parts of your body so that you don't experience it. You'll block off, you know, oxygen getting to the brain, so that, because there's this really interesting fact that 30% of oxygen needs to be in the brain for a woman to have an orgasm. It doesn't happen like that for a male. It happens like that for a female, right? We find out all these little things and we look at that and go, wow, that makes sense. That makes sense. If you're in a low oxygen state, they call that hypercapnic state, which, by the way, most people are walking around in that state at some stage or another, right? And then you go and try and be intimate, and you think there's something wrong with you because you cannot get yourself to that state. Well, it can often be a problem with the breathing through emotional trauma, or through, you know, so all these things are interconnected with each other. And we've just found that this work gives liberation to people in a way that they're kind of gone, I didn't think to look at my breathing. I didn't think to go to somewhere that was so simple that I do all day, every day, all the time, right? But yeah, it is.
Well,
and,
you know, when you do it every day, you don't place importance on it until there's a problem with
so
it.
true.
And then,
yeah, it's so true. I actually have a client who, that was one of the first things that we worked on, was her sleep and then breathing. And I'm like, I don't care about any of this other stuff that you have going on, because, oh, guess what? This will probably handle that.
yes.
And what she realized is, what she said is, I've been holding my breath like basically my whole life. So I'd love to ask you, how do you take a proper breath? Like how should it be?
That is a great question.
It is a great question. And you can't give one answer, because
but we'll do a really good job of explaining it.
We can give you a framework as such.
A framework.
because our breathing is unique to us as individuals. So that's why breathing methods don't work for everyone. It might be, what we found is that, in rooms of breathing with like 500 people, a third of them love it, a third of them hate it, and a third of them are indifferent. And we were like, why? And here's why: because people have different perceptions on how they receive how the energy is flowing in their body. So some people will like it, some people won't, and some people are like, I'm not sure about that. So what we went to work on is like, okay, well, how can we teach a basic framework in which people can go exploring for themselves what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So we look at it in like a 3-step process. You observe your breathing. If it's serving you, great. If it's not, then go to step 2, do something about it, do something different. And we've got a little bit of a framework that we take people through about what can you do as a self-exploration to work through what's not serving you. Then once you get through that point, it's get to being. Then you can just be the breath and allow the breath to self-regulate the way it's naturally inbuilt to do. So
this let me add some, I want to add some meat onto that framework that Angie laid down, because it sounds really simple, but it's very, very deep and profound. The awareness or observation part of the breathing is a massive core part that we completely miss. Here's the first of the practical tips for everyone listening, and that is, if you spend just 30 seconds at the start of the day just observing your breathing, just sitting quietly, close your eyes and just observe your breathing. Where does it go? What does it do? Where do you feel? Are you breathing low? Are you feeling breathing high? Are you holding your breath? Right? All these things that you'll be able to notice. And something really magical happens when you do that. The first thing is as soon as you put some awareness on your breath, your breathing starts to self-correct itself. It will, because your awareness comes into it. And you're like, oh, and your body goes, okay, now you're putting attention and awareness on it. It's like, for example, in, if you do exercise or you do yoga, or you do anything where you're focusing on your movement or you're focusing on stretching, you'll notice that the stretch will go further, or you'll be more fluent in an action when you are incorporating your awareness into what's going on. And often, and this again is an awareness thing, we're often not aware of what we're doing. So even when we're doing exercise or we're at yoga, we could be somewhere else, right? You could be, your mind's on thinking about, right? Thinking about business or thinking about this. And that's, that comes into that whole aspect of not being present. And everyone hears that and they always go, oh, I've got to be more present. What does that actually mean? Well, this is the ultimate practice in simplicity that you can do. And that's just sitting for 30 seconds and just recognizing your breath.
You don't have to put yoga pants on.
No, that was the first
yoga pants. I mean,
I'm wearing my yoga pants.
That was the first one. The second one Angie mentioned there was doing something, but we also call this intervening or doing an intervention with your breathing. And this is where a lot of people think breath work is. They think breath work is you've got to do something with your breathing. Now, to answer your question specifically about taking a really good breath, this is where it's a more because your breathing is a complex system, it takes a nuanced answer. A proper breath relies on you having the right amount of CO2 retained in your breathing. That's a chemical aspect of it. So the way you breathe mechanically doesn't really make a difference, right? It does make a difference, but it doesn't in relationship to how the gases exchange in your body.
Got it.
Right. So you know how you often hear people say, oh, you shouldn't chest breathe. Chest breathing is going to bring on anxiety. Well, yes. And in some cases, when you're in, say, for example, you're sprinting or you're doing so, you are going to breathe in your chest and you're going to breathe high. Right. There's going to be times where you're going to do it. There's times where you do that kind of breathing to release emotions. There's all kinds of things. So belly breathing, chest breathing, holding your breath can be bad, or holding your breath can also be good, right? Like depending on what situation you're in and why you're doing it, and depending on whether you've got awareness on whether you're doing it or not, right? If you're unaware of breath holding and it's causing you to have low CO2 because you keep interfering with the cycle, then that's a problem, right? But it's more nuanced because it's a system that works to calibrate on what's happening in the environment. And it's a system that you can actually take control of. And that's a very unique part about breathing, is that you have conscious awareness. And when you're not thinking about it, it's going to do it for you. Think about when you're asleep.
Right.
Right. And so the idea behind taking a really good breath means that you go through this process that we just described, this 3-step process, which is becoming aware, understanding how to do your breathing, right? And that's where we bring in the concept. You guys have been through the training where you go through the shapes. That's so you can understand how to do certain patterns in the breathing. It's not extensive by all means, but it's a really good idea. You know, you imagine a shape in your mind and you breathe in the shape of, you know, whether it's a square, a circle, or a triangle. It's very, very basic. But then you get to this important part about being the breathing. And what that means is it means that you're self-regulating. It means that when you turn up and you turn up to a hostile environment, your body automatically goes into a relaxed, steady breathing state so that you can stay focused and aware of what's going on around you. So your body responds before you do. And that's the idea about waking up the natural breathing instinct in your body. And so then you don't have to worry about your breathing, because some people can become really, really obsessed about their breathing. And what they do is they obsess over their breathing, and then they give themselves all these different mood swings and low CO2 because they're obsessing, because your breathing is designed for you to be involved in it sometimes and not be involved in it at other times. And if you think about meditation, I get asked this a lot. People are like, well, what's the difference between, say, sitting and breathing and meditating? And I'm like, well, it's a very, very nuanced thing. The difference between you actually getting into a meditative state is when you can let go of your breathing. And in order to let go of your breathing, you have to be able to train yourself to become aware of it, intervene in it, and then let it be. So let the natural instinct take over. And that 3-step process is what our work is based around, is getting people to go through. And they're deep, you know, they're an inch wide, mile deep type of processes. And in fact, I would say, I don't even think you would get to the bottom of either of them in a lifetime, just because there's so much to do, right? But it is a worthwhile practice. It gives you so much bang for buck when it comes to feeling good in your body, your health, your sleep, you know, your ability to focus and concentrate, your ability to manifest things, because, you know, the idea behind you manifesting is not this magical, you sit there and just imagine a bag of gold and it drops on your head. It's, you've got to have focus and attention, and you've got to go out and get things done. You've got to be able to relate to people. You've got to be able to get into action. And so you know, this process of these 3 steps allows you to really put some focus into those areas. And that's really why we teach it as a base of personal excellence, is because it delivers all of that. And you can have fun doing it. Like it's actually pleasurable. You can get high from breathing. It's amazing. Like, you know, you get just a different sensation in your body. So you can hear that I'm obsessed by it.
I love that too, because I mean, obviously the people listening can't see me, but even back when you were talking about the word inspiration and how in all of these different various religions, it's all from that. That's like my background was religious studies, geeking out about that. In Greek, it's pneuma, which means both breath and spirit. It's the same word. I'm like, this stuff is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this stuff so much. And I want to ask you something that I ask every single one of my guests on this show. And that is, how do you define wealth?
Well, for me, it's a wealth as a perception. So you can perceive yourself as wealthy or not perceive yourself, or perceive yourself as poor.
That is so true. No matter how much money you have.
No matter how much money you have. Yeah. Yeah. Because you can have $1 million, but you spend $1 million and you don't have any money. So it has nothing to do with, you know, with that. So how I look at it, you know, and how this ties into breathing is it's the energy in which we operate will determine your experience of wealth. So that being said, if I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't want to make another lunch today, or, just mundane, another day, another duty. When am I gonna arrive? It's like, the fish never complains about why it has to swim all the time. It just swims, right? So, that's, a reference that I use. So for me, it's like, I'm always checking in with my perceptions. I'm always checking in with, if I have a complaint, is there a way that I can turn it around to be, can I perceive this differently? So, like probably the biggest, freshest thing in my mind is that, we just moved house. We paid for a cleaner to come and clean the house. They showed up and then didn't do the job and then took our money and left. And then I had to spend all week cleaning. And you can imagine I had
That's not
lots of
cool.
perceptions. Yeah, I had
Humbling.
lots of
It was a
perceptions come up,
humbling experience.
judgments about people who operate business, out of integrity. How do they sleep at night? And my complaints of, like my hands are getting chemicals, let's stop the complaints there, because I could have gone down on a very, very slippery, valid slope and got lots of agreement from people around me. But I was like, no, because that is going to have me perceive that I'm miserable and life is miserable. And then things are probably going to get more miserable from there. So I had to consciously go, okay, check my perceptions. And I started finding all the paint that I was cleaning off the walls from when the girls were doing their arts and crafts, and remembering all those times. And then, and then going, okay, well, this is a transition phase. I'm moving from a townhouse to home. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to clean this house and say goodbye to an old way. So it's like, there's always a way that you can shift perceptions, and our perceptions also impact how we breathe. So if you also have a look, if you're always looking at perceptions from a place of complaining or explaining or blaming, below the line thinking, your body will become below the line in its health. So for me, to answer your question shortly, I just manage my perceptions.
You know what I love so much about that is in A Course in Miracles, it talks about a miracle being simply a shift of perception or perspective. And I'm like, that's exactly what you just said. So all of that turns into, or can turn into, a miracle if we choose to see it that way. So that is awesome. What about you, Shane?
For me, I kind of touched on it before, and I'll give some examples of this, but it is really your energy. Like I 100% agree with everything Angie said. You'll get robbed of energy if you focus on what you don't want instead of what you do want, or not being able to recognize the lessons, the silver linings in whatever goes on, everything that turns up, all these experiences that we had moving house were all meant to happen to us because it reminds you of how it humbles you, right? Like, you bless people instead of complaining or blaming them, because ultimately it's just a better way to go. Like, it's just that your energy stays up, it doesn't get drained. I sit in my backyard and enjoy looking at the plants in the backyard, and I think to myself, it's a moment of perfect enjoyment sitting there, just being in your own yard. And the more often I can have those moments, the wealthier that I feel. And that's not to say that we don't take care of our money. It's not to say that we don't take care of our health. They're very big parts. And I will say,
take action on it.
yeah, and I will say something about money. The physical aspect of money is like, in my view, is supposed to allow you to have the time and the choice to get to that point where you can sit in the backyard and just look at the plants and be enjoying sitting.
Freedom, baby.
Yeah, that's and that's really what it's about. And ultimately, it's a tool, but you do not want to be attached to it. You don't want to do things for the for the love of money. It's that striving will always deplete your energy. Striving for the next, it's never enough, will always deplete your energy. So I think wealth for me is a combination of guarding against that kind of thinking, being totally absorbed or totally consumed by that striving, and also focusing on, I mean, I have two daughters. They drive me insane. But at the same time, they're the greatest achievement in my life, and our relationship is also a great achievement, because it's something that's sacred to us, and it's something that we kind of look at each other like, I joke and I say, no one else could live with me. Right. So like I joke about that. I joke about that. But the ability for you to be yourself around someone else at such a deep level is liberating. And that is a huge amount of wealth, to be able to express whatever's on your mind and just say whatever your dream was the night before, and without fear of someone thinking it's weird, or, these small things are the things that sort of that really come into it. So
I want to share something with you too, because it is just kind of what you were talking about, and also what you spoke to earlier about everybody doing their own work in partnership. My husband and I called that a self-cleaning oven, because it was like, we need to do our own inner work. It's very easy to blame the other person and say, oh, well, this is about them or their fault or whatever. But when you look inside, that's what you have to do. And it's all about going first in that process. So I love that you two do that. I'm such a huge fan of both of you and everything you've got going on. And one of the things you have going on is a challenge that you are offering to all of my listeners. So if you would describe what that is, and then I'll give them the link. And I would be so delighted to have so many of these people that are hearing this show sign up with you and try out this breathing challenge.
Well, it's a breathing wellness challenge, and basically it's a breathing practice of 6 minutes in the morning, 6 minutes in the evening. Just book into your day. When you wake up in the morning, do the morning one. When you right before you go to sleep, do the evening one. And it's really meant to manage the transitions, the major transitions in every day. So you wake up in the morning, it's to wake you up and get you, in a regulated state before you even go into work or manage the children in the morning. And then in the evening, it's about letting go of any sort of frustrations of the day, or letting go of any energy of the day, so you can have a restful sleep, rather than going straight to sleep and having a stress sleep and waking up in the morning with like jaw tension. So the idea is also to create that habit of awareness. Really, that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's a habit forming. We've created a tick and flick sheet so that you can either print it out or just digitally do it. And it's that consistency of ticking off that you've done it for the day. I know it sounds very rote and but it is, that's how we're designed in our brain. So that habit forming thing and ticking off, little wins, micro wins, that's really what it's about. So it's 12, as Angie said, 12 minutes a day. The only thing that we ask is that if you miss a day, you start again and go through, because there has to be a little bit of accountability in it.
I love it. I love it. So if you all listening are interested in checking that out, you can find that free challenge at lucra.com/breathing. It is there for you. You can learn more about Angie and Shane and everything that they have going on. Angie, Shane, thank you so much. This has been awesome. As I mentioned, I adore you both. I love what you're up to. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mindy. It's been amazing.
Yeah, you've been awesome support for us too, Mindy. It's been a really pleasure to work with you.
Ready to make your dream your reality? Let's build your business so you can do what you are here to do. I invite you to join my inner circle, the Lucra Collective, a community of like-minded entrepreneurs who got over the limiting belief that they needed to go it alone. Visit lucra.com to join today. That's lucra.com. Lucra, where wealth equals well-being.